Now that we've successfully installed RWMR on our computer, let's start using it. We first need to define some basic information, like the facility we're operating in. Most of the items in RISE and therefore in RWMR are uniquely identified by a regulatory authority number, RAN. Our facility shall be called Facility A and is in operation. We leave the optional information fields blank for now. Secondly, we need to create at least one worker who can be assigned to certain activities. Again, we need a RAN and at least a name. Here we see that information on the second tab is required as well before we are allowed to create the worker. John Dorian works in Facility A, is active in the facility and monitored regarding contamination. Also, we need to have at least one matrix defined. This can be done in the Regulatory System tab, selecting RWMR on the left. Let's take some ballpark numbers and apply. While the next step is not mandatory to create a waste record, it's useful as we intend to track waste that has been received from an external source, a waste generator. Now we can start to create our first waste record. Every waste record is identified by a waste ID that is also unique. Waste and generation type as well as waste state and the facility in which we are operating are mandatory. For virtually every field in RWMR, you can get quick help when hovering over the field name. As we are currently describing historical waste generated externally, we leave the field origin facility empty and select the external waste generator we created earlier. Now we can further describe the waste according to the main attributes we selected above. Every combination of processed, unprocessed, routine, non-routine, and solid, liquid, or sealed source waste will offer its own set of descriptive fields. In the next section, we can enter radiation information for alpha, beta, gamma, and total activity. We can describe whether the radiation was analyzed, calculated, estimated, or certified. We'll assume that we analyzed our waste package on 1st January 2012. The section Update Info cannot be modified in the UI. Again, we have some mandatory fields on the second tab. Here we'll describe the status of the waste as stored by John Dorian on 1st of January 2013. Great! Going back to list and hitting the query button shows us the main attributes of our first waste record. If we need to further describe the waste package, we can, for example, add an image of the waste in its current state. Also, we can describe the nuclides in our waste package. Let's add a gold isotope analyzed on 1st of January 2013. Note how the field current activity changes after saving the data. The quick help says that the calculated activity at current activity date is based on the field's activity and activity date above. Let's add another isotope to see how the activity adds up on the total activity in the tab Waste Details later. If a waste is contaminated, we can enter the details on the next tab, again optionally providing the data sources. Lastly, we can provide additional documentation in the tab Documents, either by attaching a file or leaving a comment. Let's apply and go back to the waste details of our current waste record and scroll down to the radiation section. Here we see the total activity calculated from the nuclide information we provided earlier. If you don't want to have the activity calculated for the current date time, you may enter any date to project the total activity in the future or past. When dealing with routine waste that can be expected to have more or less the same attributes, like waste class, package type, radiation, etc., it can be useful to define those attributes as approved specifications. As we do not have such a specification yet, let's save this routine waste record without details for now. Under Regulatory System, RWMR, we can add an approved specification for the waste type we are just dealing with. Note that if you do not specify origin facility, the specification can be applied to any facility. Let's define the maximum package mass of 150 kg and the maximum volume as 200 liters, besides some ballpark average values for radiation. Hit apply and go back and apply those specifications to the routine waste we created earlier. Now let's have a look at acceptance requirements. When dealing with non-routine waste, for example from an external waste generator, it can be useful to enforce certain acceptance criteria. Let's assume we just received this processed solid waste package, entering all of its details. We do have a shipment number, and enter, for example, package mass 200 kg and the package volume 50 cubic meters. We leave the radiation section blank and say that it's currently stored in our processed waste storage in Hall 2. So now we have the waste stored, but we are not sure whether or not it meets any acceptance criteria. So let's go ahead and define such requirements for processed solid waste. In the regulatory system section under RWMR. We can define maximum and minimum values for some of the attributes, maximum values for radiation, as well as expected package types, container types, and so on. Here is our acceptance requirement PSW in the system. So now we'll apply these requirements we just created to our non-routine waste package. Scrolling down and hitting Edit button, we can now apply our acceptance requirement without any further changes. This time, when trying to save the record, we get a validation feedback as the waste package does not meet the requirements we've just defined. We need to go back and modify the non-fixed surface contamination, the mass, and the package type before the record compiles and complies with the acceptance requirement. Note that we do have the option to ignore the validation warning and go ahead saving the invalid record anyway, if we deem this a good practice.